From a highly secure network of top secret locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider. I'm Mike Finger, joined as always by our panel of Express News sports writers Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn, with sports editor Nick Talbot. Jeff, I believe, is back in his secure location after quite a week in Gay Paris. Jeff, we're going to start with a report from you on all that you experienced, the sights, the sounds, 2 blowout Spurs extravaganzas, one in favor of the local Cagers, one against them. What is your takeaway from that week in France, Jeff McDonald?
First, I just wanted to say bonjour, everybody.
There you go.
Bonjour,
changed man.
Yeah. What did my takeaways from the trip, from the Paris trip? I mean, number one, and it's no surprise, is how popular Wemby is there. And if you're sitting in the United States and you've never been there to witness it firsthand, and you think, well, of course, Victor Wembanyama is a very popular figure in his home country. Of course, he'd have a lot of fans there. The level of fandom you're thinking in your head is not even close to what I witnessed and probably you witnessed in the Olympics when you covered the Olympics there over the summer. Just more than a basketball player, just a celebrity there. But as far as the games themselves, the way he was greeted there and just they cheered his every move. Like the first game, they're cheering the layup line like it's an actual game. It's not because they're confused or don't know how the game works. They're just so happy to see Wemby. Every time his face is on the screen, it's a big roar. Every time, of course, when he's announced, a big roar. Every time he does anything positive on the floor, big roar. And it was just a really enlightening and amazing scene to watch in there. And us covering it, realized kind of the power that Victor Wembanyama wields over there, because after the first game, I asked him, because for one thing, they do the French national anthem. It was the first time, obviously, Victor's ever played an NBA game that had the French national anthem played before it. And you know how this is not going to, I'm not trying to be jingoistic here, but you know how the United States, where they play the national anthem and mostly people just stand around and listen to it, possibly, or maybe they'll get some popcorn or whatever. The French crowd sings the whole thing at the top of their lungs. And, like in America, they had a very talented singer singing it on the floor. And I asked Victor afterwards what that moment was like hearing the French national anthem sung before an NBA game. And he said, it was great, but I wish they didn't have a singer, because if you just start the song, the whole crowd sings it, and that's better than, one singer's voice overpowering the rest. And so the next game, in game 2, they didn't quite go all the way to acquiesce to that, but the singer would made a point of taking like some lines off so that the whole arena could sing a cappella. And it was just because Victor said that on the podium after one of the games. So just all of that, just realizing what a star this kid is in his home country, which I think we all knew, but the level of it was really eye-opening to me.
It's a heck of an anthem. And Tom knows this. I think he knows about Rick's Cafe Americain, where there was a pretty rousing rendition of that. And that's what I always thought of before every event at the Olympics. It's a heck of a thing to hear a whole arena sing that song. And it's just like being at Rick's, Tom.
Yeah, that was quite a scene. One of the great scenes in film history.
The games themselves, where the Paris thing, I think, Jeff, you'd acknowledge a rousing success for the league, for the Spurs. Victor, everything that you wrote, everything I heard from Victor telling the assembled press seemed to suggest that he thought it was a worthwhile trip, a successful trip, wonderful experience, I think he called it, just being there. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but for the Spurs themselves, who headed to Paris after 3 pretty rough losses in a row, they had a pretty good start there, and at least they found something. I don't know if it was all just Victor being in his home country or what, but that was a much needed victory against the Pacers in the first of 2 games there, Jeff.
But then they just turned around and got smoked the next game. Like,
Bound and lost.
bound and lost. I mean, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, not amazing. It happens, I guess, but playing the same team on the same court 2 days apart, beat them by 30 one night and lose by 36 the next is there's not a lot of examples of that probably in NBA history. I mean, I'm sure it's happened, but that's a heck of a turnaround between the two games. And I don't know where to go from there. It happens. The first one, the win, we can start with the win. Yeah, it was a lot of Victor just, I don't want to act like when he plays normal games against like the Sacramento Kings at the Frost Bank Center, he's like taking plays off or dogging it or anything. But there was a different like fire in that guy's eye and a different aggression, a different like, I'm going to get this done. Really at the start of that first game, I think he was playing off a lot of adrenaline and a lot of focus and a lot of like this desire that we all know he has just to put on this amazing show. And I think the Spurs rode that for a long time. And, had that just amazing third quarter that Victor took over. That really put them over the top in that first game against Indiana. I mean, the sequence I'll always remember is as the Spurs are starting to pull away, Victor blocks Pacers shots on 3 consecutive possessions. And then has another one on the fourth, but it gets called for goaltending. But he had just taken over that game. And I think by the end of the third, we kind of realized the Spurs had pulled this one away. And then maybe coincidentally, I think game 2 also changed at the end of the third quarter the Pacers way. Like the Pacers were kind of in control of that most of the game, but the Spurs had battled back in the third quarter and I believe had taken a lead. Like they trailed by 15 at half, had taken a lead. Seemed like, hey, maybe you get to the fourth quarter, maybe something can happen. And then Tyrese Halliburton went absolutely crazy over the last 3.5 minutes of the third quarter, and it was all she wrote. It was one of the more just examples of guys just taking over a game that I've seen in a long time. And a lot of times when the Spurs give up these big 3-point runs, it's because they're like rotations are bad or they're doubling. This was just mostly just Tyrese Halliburton ISOs just torching everybody. So just give him credit, I guess. But this isn't the Pacers Insider, but that was a nice little, I guess, turnaround for Tyrese, who the last time he was in that building, he won a gold medal, but wasn't playing much. But people mentioned this after the game, and I put in one of my stories about the tweet that Tyrese put out or the Instagram message he put out after the Olympics, where it felt like doing none of the work of the group project, but getting an A. And his quote after that game 2 against the Spurs was, I participated this time, which I thought was really, really nice.
In the pages of the San Antonio Express News on expressnews.com and the Spurs Nation newsletter, you had described Victor's first game against the Pacers as his basketball Mona Lisa, and I'm wondering why you felt the need to insult it that way, because I know that you don't have that high of an opinion of the Mona Lisa itself. And in fact, I heard from a guy that I saw in France named Emmanuel Macron, who mentioned this week that they're changing the whole system for the Mona Lisa after Jeff McDonald was there and exposed its flaws. Did you hear that, Jeff, or did that happen while you were on the plane?
I guess that must have happened while I was on the plane.
They're creating a whole new system at the Louvre for the Mona Lisa because it's such a cluster, and they're going to have a separate entrance for people coming to see the Mona Lisa in the future. I think you mentioned that there was a reporter from San Antonio that exposed this flaw in the system.
Oh, it's exactly.
That's happening.
It's probably a good change. I think. I mean, it's a lot of work to get into that room to see a lot of people just go there for the one thing, and I wouldn't recommend that at most art museums, but I kind of get it.
And the one thing is not to witness great art or to view great art; it's to put it on Instagram, right? Right.
And also, what I think about, are we going to turn this into an art criticism podcast? Because the Mona Lisa is not an amazing painting. It's just a famous painting.
It's underwhelming.
Yeah. It's just a famous painting. You're going there to see history. You're going to a historical artifact. You're going there to see the Liberty Bell. not this piece of art that moves you. And the rest of the art, there is just, maybe I should put it this way, not my cup of tea. I don't like it. I
can't believe I'm agreeing with Jeff McDonald on art. But
I don't like the Renaissance and it's famous, but it's not. I prefer we're going to do art criticism here. I prefer the Impressionists. I did take went to the museum that friend of the podcast, Mike Monroe, recommended as well, and that was much better. Lots of Gauguin and Van Gogh and Monet and Manet. Much better. Much better.
And either of them nearsighted? Were either of them nearsighted?
I don't know. What is it? Is that a Seinfeld?
More to Seinfeld's contention. Art critic, one of my favorite art critics.
I'm going to weigh in here by saying you can't beat Edward Hopper.
That's true, Tom.
And number two,
Nighthawks.
The Nighthawk.
I saw that one in Chicago this year. I've been on a like an art tour.
People are underestimating our art knowledge in this podcast, bro. They're like, what the heck is going on?
And they're tuning out in droves.
Italy wants the Mona Lisa back. That was in the news this week too.
That is true, Tom.
Well, they can have it as far as I'm concerned.
I wonder if that was a piece just to add to the stakes of either the Olympics, the All-Star game, or anything like that. Like to put the Mona Lisa as a prize for the country that wins a gold medal. That would be something. Something basketball-wise, something that occurred in those games in Paris that I suppose we should get to before we get to the big hot take topic on the trade market and whatnot. To ease Jeremy Sohan back into the lineup, he returned after missing a few games in a row. That first game, I had thought that we were going to discuss on the podcast that is this the future way to make Stefan Castle and Jeremy Sohan play together? Is Jeremy now a bench player? Does Stefan Castle play better with the starters, which he absolutely does? I think we've got enough data over the course of the year to realize that Castle plays better as a starter. To me, that first game, it seemed like that was something that Mitch Johnson may have discovered by accident, on purpose, who knows, combination of both, that could work, that like maybe Jeremy's a better player coming off the bench and get his minutes that way. Maybe keep Stefan Castle in the starting lineup playing with Chris Paul and Wemby, like it was a 30-point victory over the Pacers. You had the same mix in the second game and it did not work as well, but I'm just wondering in the future, do we think, Jeff, did you talk to anyone there about any of this that would shed any insight as to whether or not this could be a setup that could last, or was that just a work Jeremy back into the rotation type of deal?
I'm kind of wondering if it's going to be like you remember a few weeks ago. This is maybe a bad example, but a few weeks ago where you're looking for everybody's back, and you're looking for a backup five for Wemby, and that had been Zach Collins' job. And that didn't really work, so he went to Charles Bassey, and that looked okay for a second. And then that didn't work, so he went back to Zach for a while, and then I just wonder if there's going to be a lot of trial and error with that configuration between Castle and Sohan. I don't, because you have the tale of two games. I mean, it's a 2-game sample, so it's hard to really tell which game is the better representation of what it will be. But yeah, the first game, Jeremy was really active and really involved, and Steph had a big game too. And the second game, Steph wasn't as good, but was adequate. And I felt like the second game, Jeremy was kind of, you didn't feel him in that game. And he's a guy that you need to feel his presence in certain ways, because he's not going to score 30. So you need to feel his presence in other ways, and it just wasn't clicking. And I don't know if that has to do with, the lineup configuration, or he just had an off night, or he's just inconsistent, or it's his second game back from a layoff, and you should expect some hills and valleys. So I just think the best thing you can say is that's just something worth looking at and watching and monitoring going forward, is how the Spurs use those two and how it looks, because I can see how you can get into this roller coaster if it looks good for a while and then you want to change it because it doesn't look good and that doesn't look good, and back and forth. I just think we'll call that a challenge for Mitch Johnson and company going forward. And I guess
well, one notable tangent here is, and this may or may not have been a direct result of moving those guys around. But with Jeremy as the backup, you also had Sandro Mamukelashvili, the sensation taking over France, as the in that second unit in both of those games. And maybe they saw that as a way with Jeremy in the lineup, able to shoulder some more of that big man burden, that they could get away with not having Bassi or Collins as the backup five out there, that they were kind of the combination front court, Sohan and Mamu. Like, did you like that? And is he overtaking? Can he overtake Charles Bassi and Zach Collins for those backup minutes?
I don't know. It just sounds like you have a lot of flawed options at that spot. And if he does it, then you're giving up a little bit of defense and a little bit of size, stuff like that, rebounding probably, shot blocking. But you're getting, he's a better ball mover. He's a better connective piece. Probably a better floor stretcher than either of those guys. Although having not played in a long time, Mamu, his shot's not there. Like, I don't know if you remember earlier in the season, the preseason, he seemed automatic from three. And, that's just not there because he hadn't had the reps lately. So to gain that, to gain what Mamu gives you, you're giving up what other guys give you. And it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube puzzle of what you want to give up to gain something. I did make note that Mamu finally got in the rotation and then got kicked out of the second game in France. So yeah, that was nice. That was nice of him.
Tom, anything? What were your impressions watching the game from your secure location?
That certainly was something that popped out to me, was just what they're going to do with Castle and Sohan. We'll ask Mitch about that tonight. But it just was kind of a microcosm of the Spurs season to the extreme.
Yeah.
The blowout win, the blowout loss. Just the lack of consistency continues to be an issue. And like I said, it was to the extreme in this point, in this case. But, that's we've talked about that a lot on previous shows, that, it is what they are. They are a 500 team or hovering right below it. And it's only going to get tougher, with them being away for the entirety of March. February. And it's just it's an issue that's plagued this team all season.
Well done, Tom, because that is a perfect segue as we talk about the state of the local Cagers, who are 20-23 at the time of this recording. By the way, thank you to all the listeners for bearing with us. You're going to get this a little later during the week than you usually do. Maybe not before the Wednesday night game against the Los Angeles Clippers, and maybe before. We'll see. Depends on when it hits your player. But the Spurs are, as Tom mentioned, under 500, at sort of a crossroads heading into the month of the rodeo road trip. Are they going to be a contender? Are they not going to be a contender? 2.5 games out of 10th place right now. Something that developed Tuesday afternoon in a well-coordinated, just if not well-coordinated, then awfully coincidental set of scoops around the league from the fine reporters who cover this league, all mentioning that the Sacramento Kings, who are in 10th place, who have won 7 of their last 10, on a bit of a roll since firing Mike Brown, are suddenly open to the possibility of trading their all-star point guard, one of the star young players in the NBA, De'Aaron Fox of Houston, Texas. They're open to offers, and also all of these coincidental reports around the league mention that the young man, De'Aaron Fox, had a team in mind that he would like to go to, that he was zeroing in on a team, that his representation had a preference as to where he would go. And there have been multiple reports that suggest that team is not the Los Angeles Lakers, not the Golden State Warriors, not the New York Knicks, not the Miami Heat, but the glamour market, the center of the basketball universe, the team where everyone wants to join in, your San Antonio Spurs. I'm just going to open that topic up to the floor. Anybody who wants to jump in, first impressions of that news, thoughts about whether or not this would be a player you'd like the Spurs to acquire before the deadline, what that does to their season, what that does to their long-term prospects, whether or not this is a fit. Anybody want to jump in?
I think the fit is obvious.
Yeah.
Like if you're just talking about the fit, it's obvious. Like De'Aaron's a guy that's going to take the team to, he's a guy that has a very good chance of providing the launching pad for the next jump that this team needs to make, and makes them a playoff team, if not to finish this season, then in the future. The question would be, can you re-sign him long term after that? Which I think that would be worked out before a trade. The Spurs aren't going to give up a bunch of stuff for a guy that isn't going to re-sign, but I think that's what part of what is going on with his representatives leaking this sort of information is to let people let the Spurs know, let people know that De'Aaron would be in this in the long haul if a trade is made. You could make the argument, that'd be an interesting one. If he wants to come here so bad, why not just wait and sign him and not have to give up assets? Because you could certainly create enough cap space to do that, even at a supermax with who you have on the roster.
Just to review for the listeners, viewers, fans at home, he's a free agent in 2026. So that's the situation there, is that it's another full season after this that you'd have to wait to sign him.
Right.
And maybe he doesn't want to wait around Sacramento that long. Maybe he wants to get this started. And for the Spurs, not to cut you off completely, I'll let you finish your thoughts. But the incentive to get this done now is not necessarily that you're going to compete for a title this year or maybe even next year. It's that if you get him now, then you can sign him to an extension and get this all taken care of as soon as possible and set forth on your plan with these two all-star cohorts, as opposed to letting the next, 17, 18 months go by and maybe things change and you miss your chance. If you just sit and wait, like maybe something changes and he goes somewhere else, like his hometown Rockets decide they want to get involved. Whoever, but decide they want to get involved. That's the reason
to pull the trigger
to do this now, from both the Aaron Fox's perspective, where he can get to that extension sooner with his new club if this trade is made now as opposed to this summer, or he waits for free agency. And that's also the incentive for the Spurs to do it. But there are other sides, and I will let you finish your thought.
I forgot. What would it take to get De'Aaron Fox now? Probably a ton of draft capital, which is fine. Like, that's what it's for. Maybe like a Zach Collins to kind of make the contracts work. But then you're probably talking about they're going to want a Devin Vassell or a Steph Castle or somebody good, like somebody that can, is an upper tier kind of player. I don't think the Kings are just going to take draft compensation and a bunch of contract filler. You're going to have to give up someone good, and I would be fine with that. Devin or Steph, if they're in the deal, that's okay. Like you're making an upgrade.
You bring up an interesting point there, and a good point there, because I've seen some, this hits all the national outlets, as Spurs news often does these days. And some proposals I've seen, and this is technically true, that a deal that works according to the league rules, the CBA, the salary cap, all that stuff, Zach Collins and Keldon Johnson's contracts match up with the Aaron Fox's contract. And it is technically true that a Keldon Johnson plus Zach Collins plus a butt ton of draft capital works. But I tend to agree with Jeff in that the Kings probably are hoping for a current player with a little more upside, a little more to offer than either Keldon Johnson or Zach. I'm not sure that Keldon Johnson plus Zach Collins plus a bunch of draft capital gets it done, depending on what the Kings want.
Exactly. It's also unclear what the Kings what the Kings' goals are here or for this season. Like they fired Mike Brown for underperformance, I guess. So that tends to point to me that they're trying to make the playoffs. They're trying to have a great season. So I don't know why they would trade De'Aaron Fox anyway, except for they don't think that they can re-sign him when he needs to be.
Well,
re-signed.
With the caveat, with the disclaimer that this is not the Kings Insider, and we're not talking to people in the building in Sacramento. I don't think we are. Maybe Tom has. Tom's got sources everywhere, but there's no insight here, firsthand insight on what's happening there. But it sounds like the Kings did not wake up yesterday and say we're ready to trade him. Like this clearly is coming from De'Aaron Fox. Like De'Aaron Fox wants out. And now then the Kings came to the realization that, hey, De'Aaron Fox really wants out, and we need to start thinking about this, or everything's going to go to heck in a handbasket, and we're not going to get any value for a really attractive piece right now. And so that's why the Kings are doing this.
But they don't want a Kawhi Leonard situation on their hands down the road.
Right. But Jeff is right in that what also adds to this is that the Kings have never won anything. And the Kings are just perennially terrible. And they're not going to want to just reset. And they see this as a chance, like you mentioned, like they fired Mike Brown. They're on a roll here. They got a chance to be in the play-in, to be in the playoffs. They're not going to just want to give up on that and start over again. So I feel like these talks could be really complicated.
Yeah.
And it's not so simple as, like, here's the other thing. If they want to stay in this, and they won a few games without De'Aaron Fox, I believe. Like they were doing okay without him. Like, would they want? And I would be against this for personal reasons because he's such good copy and content, and he entertains me. Like, would they? Is it point guard for point guard? Do you throw Chris Paul into this? And would they say, hey, we want Chris Paul around to lead us to a play-in this year? Like, if you're the Spurs and you're adding De'Aaron Fox, like that's the guy who plays Chris Paul's position. I would just hate for the Spurs to trade Chris Paul in the middle of the season because he's been such an instrumental part of what's made this season fun and interesting. But I just don't
doing
see
this a long time though. You think he's never been traded to Sacramento before?
I gotta believe the Kings would start with Castle. You know, that's the plum to get, and I don't see the Spurs parting ways with him.
I don't either.
Yeah.
If De'Aaron Fox is the payoff, I don't think Steph Castle should be untouchable.
I don't think he shouldn't either, but I don't think
know.
there's this. There's shades of gray here. It's why it's so difficult to give the aggregators a headline from this podcast because I don't have any aggregatable hot takes. But like,
I mean,
the reason why I'm skeptical this gets done in the middle of the season is, okay, the Kings are going to hold out for Stephon Castle as the big plum, as the big prize. And I don't see really any reason for the Spurs to give into that right now when they can wait.
No.
And so like that, and I also don't see the Kings giving in and saying, okay, we'll take Keldon Johnson and Zach Collins and a bunch of draft capital either. Like they aren't that desperate either.
Yeah,
so
that gets them nowhere.
Right. Well, I mean, they'd just be relying on all the drafts. It wouldn't be they aren't interested in Keldon or Zach. Mm-hmm. And by the way, like all this, the callousness of this sort of is irksome too, because I think I speak for Tom and Jeff, all of us here, like Zach Collins and Keldon Johnson are like people that we enjoy talking to. And like everyone sees Keldon as this contract and this guy who, we could lose him, you know, like if we're building for the future, that's no big deal to lose Keldon Johnson. Like time and time again, we have heard from people around the Spurs, there's no one who's bought into the Spurs way in this current group more than Keldon Johnson. There's been no better teammate no better, compatriot on this team than Keldon. Like he is San Antonio to the bone. As this, he's got his little farm and his ranch outside of town.
He wore a
He loves
cowboy
being
hat
San-
to Paris.
That's what I was going to say. As a further illustration, Spurs did their team picture at the Eiffel Tower that every team does when they go to Paris. You'll never guess how Keldon Johnson dressed for that photo. And by you'll never guess, I mean you'll completely guess immediately. Jeans, boots, cowboy hat, Texas to the bone, man.
We talked to him about his chickens, about his cows, about his dove hunts, all that type of stuff. Like, and anytime the Spurs need a community guy, to go talk to kids, to go represent the Spurs at some function, to come to our Nick Talbot organized high school sports awards. Like Keldon was the first Spur to ever do that with us, and he did it happily. Trey Jones did it the next year, but I know that that this is a big business and that you're trying to win championships and that the listeners they aren't interested in all that type of stuff, but it's not so easy to just say, yeah, we'll throw in Keldon Johnson to this deal to get this guy. Like, and I think if it makes the team better and you get a De'Aaron Fox, of course you do that. But I mean, there's more value to some of these guys than the stat sheet stuff. And
Right. On a personal level, they didn't want to trade George Hill for Kawhi Leonard, but they had to.
For sure.
Put
I'm not trying to be like
face
overly
on it,
sentimental.
Mike, but I don't think it matters.
No, I get it. I just wanted to throw that out there. It's a
Like
a
I
long
said,
podcast. It's not gonna. It is a business. If the Kings tomorrow said, yeah, we'll take Keldon Johnson and Zach Collins and 3-4 first-round draft picks, I think the Spurs probably do that deal. It does work. I don't think the
Without
Kings
blinking,
will do
probably.
that. What's that?
Without even blinking, probably.
Yeah, well,
Spurs would do that without even
my
blinking.
point is they might blink.
I don't know about that.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
I don't know about that.
No,
Maybe
That's the
blinking.
deal.
No blinking.
I'm being Pollyannish here.
No, you put a good human face on this, and that's good.
You know what it is, Tom? It's empathy.
That's true. And more, Fox, he's going to lose millions. He could get that Supermax.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that this morning. It's in the neighborhood of 50 million. And you say 50 million, who cares? He's got to make millions anyway, but I don't know.
There's a human element to it too, though. Like his wife
And
and her family are from San Antonio.
And you cannot ignore that. That's huge too.
And if anyone who's ever been married, if there's a chance to make your wife happy, you might consider that.
Right.
I might give it a little bit more weight.
But 50 million makes everybody happy too.
That's true.
I'm gonna screw this reference up a little bit, and the reputation and social esteem of Dave Chappelle has changed over the years, but I think he's had his really, really brilliant moments. And one of my favorite Dave Chappelle moments was after he came back. He walked away from a show and went overseas and came back and did an interview with David Letterman. And he was talking about how he had, all the money in the world, and that, yes, he gave up, I think it was something like $100 million to walk away from the show. And he said, Dave, what I got to thinking about is the difference between having, $200 million and $100 million is a staggering $100 million. Like it's still a lot of money. And I screwed up that quote, but the point is, like, yes, a lot of money is a lot of money, but passing up the 50 million that De'Aaron Fox is going to pass up, that's a lot of money to not have. And yes, he can be happy either way. The wife can be happy either way. He can play with Victor Wembanyama. But Tom's right. He's passing up money by not re-signing with his current team. And that's why I also this is not the podcast to listen to for all the minutia about salary cap rules, but I believe that if De'Aaron Fox is traded before the deadline on February 6th, that he could get to the extension and the new contract with his new team and the extension sooner, which would increase his long-term earning potential by a significant amount, as opposed to if the deal is done this summer or if he waits a year and a half. I believe that's true.
That is correct. Yep. Looking at it in black and white, you are correct.
And so there's a lot that goes into this. There's the make your family happy. There's San Antonio is much closer to his roots in Houston. There is the chance to play with Victor Wembanyama as opposed to Sabonis. There is maybe the tradition of the Spurs, all that stuff. There's also money, and then there's also lots to think about from the Spurs angle. But I have a feeling that we will be talking about this in future Spurs Insider podcasts. Thanks for the patience of everybody this week, letting us take a little extra time to get this done for you. We will be back on our usual schedule moving forward. I guess we have not gotten to the week ahead. We've been so focused on the past that we have not hit on the week ahead. Tom, what we got the Clippers in town on Wednesday night. Giannis and the Bucks on Friday coming to the Frost Bank Center, and then in the last game in the Frost Bank Center in the entire month of February, on February 1st, the hated Miami Heat come into town.
Yeah.
Second night of a back-to-back before a trip to Memphis on Monday. That is 4 games before we convene again at the Spurs Insider. 3 at home, 1 on the road at Memphis, who the Spurs cannot beat to save their lives.
Yep.
What you got, Tom, in those 4 games?
I did terrible on the last prediction.
Oh, you didn't? You weren't around for the preparers preview when we all got split.
Okay,
but
before that, I did poor.
We all did terrible that week where they went.
Boy, this is a tough stretch. You got Leonard, Kawhi back with the Clippers.
I was doing a podcast the day of Kawhi returning, not mentioning him until the last 2 minutes.
Yeah,
pretty good.
It's a tough 4-game stretch. I got them 1-3. With a win over Miami.
Nick?
1-3, win over Miami. They're certainly not beating Memphis. That'd be like hell freezing over if they beat Memphis at this point. So 1-3.
Jeffrey?
I will give them 2-2.
About that.
Maybe they figure it out against the Clippers, and I look for a rebound against Miami, who kind of smacked them around a little bit in Miami before they went to Paris. And I think here's a prediction for you: that Miami game will be De'Aaron Fox's debut for the Spurs.
Oh my gosh!
Now there's some
That
clickbait.
is the hottest of the hot takes.
There's some clickbait for you.
So we send you to Paris, and all of a sudden you're optimistic. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I just got all fat on pastries.
That's a better that's a better hot take than saying the Mona Lisa is just awful.
By the way, in parentheses, I don't really think that's going to happen. But
what was your favorite meal or just food moment in the in the culinary capital of the world? Did you have some really good chicken tenders?
I did not. Unfortunately, my French pronunciations are bad. But I like the beef bourguignon. Every time I do French, I start to sound like Bobby Boucher. So I try to limit it.
That sounds exactly like what you say when you order the bowl at the Frost Bank Center from the Korean place.
No, we call that something very different.
Also quite good. I'm going to go agree with Jeff McDonald and say 2-2. This might sound ridiculous because some of you might be listening to this after the Clippers game, but that's the one that I think is the key of the week. Can they steal the game against Kawhi and the Clippers on Wednesday night? If they do, they go 2-2. I think we will find out how dumb we are a week from now. We'll be back on our usual schedule. Until then, everybody take care of each other. Thanks for listening. Keep it real.